And we are live. Welcome, Brad Schrieber, to the Music Industry Summit. How are you, man?
Thank you. It's great to talk to you again, virtually, if not in the same space. Thank you for involving me in this very worthy project, David.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm really excited to have you. So, yeah, I'm David Brownstein. Welcome to the 2020 Music Industry Evolution Summit. My guest today is Brad Schrieber. Let me read you Brad Schrieber's bio because there's lots of things to let you know about. Brad Schrieber is a literary consultant and writer. His history of socially conscious songs of all genres, Music is Power, published by Rutgers University Press, was recently honored by the Forward Indies Book Awards. Schreiber's early years biography, Becoming Jimi Hendrix, i.e. the early years of Jimi Hendrix, was selected for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Library and honored by the International Book Awards. He created the True TV series North Mission Road, based upon his history of the LA coroner, and Death in Paradise, now in development as a true crime podcast series. Among his consulting work was editing at drummer John Densmore's memoir, The Doors Unhinged. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you very much. It's great
Yeah,
to be here.
yeah,
If not there, it's good to be here.
yes, definitely, definitely. Wherever we are, there we go. So,
Yeah.
so in mostly in this summit, I've been mostly talking to people about creativity and ways to be creative in the pandemic and ways to make money now the music business has changed. But we're going to take a slightly different tack today, and I really wanted to was inspired to bring you in because I wanted to talk about music and social change. How how does we are in a time of great social change, from health challenges to the Black Lives Matter movement awareness, and so much is shifting and changing right now. And there have been
Mhm.
times in American history and the world history where music has been part of that. And on one level, if we're talking to songwriters and producers, it's like, what's the process and what's the inspiration and how. But sometimes I get kind of cynical about, like, does it really make a difference? Does it really move the needle? Does a powerful song change any minds and make any actual differences in the actual world? And so I wanted to have you come on and tell us about a few places where that is.
Yeah, that's not unusual, that reaction either, David. A lot of people think your expression of creativity, if you're a working musician or engineer or producer, agent, etc., in the music industry, um, you love music and you care about it, but hey, the assumption is it really doesn't change the world, even if you're very socially conscious, even if you're, you know, aspiring to be the next Joan Baez. Well, Music is Power actually proves that there are songs that changed modern history. For example, in the mid 60s, there was a #1 hit called Eve of Destruction. It was written by a guy named Phil Sloan, P.F. Sloan, who was phenomenal. He was a composer, musician, arranger, producer. He was just phenomenally gifted. And that song condemned a lot of things that were perceived as ill with the United States in the mid 60s. One of the things that song accomplished, amazingly, is it led to the 26th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Not immediately, but inevitably, Richard Nixon realized that the young people in the country were really angry. And there was a line in Eve of Destruction that said, "You're old enough to kill, but not for voting." Followed by "Even the Jordan River has bodies floating." The song took on religion and war and racism. So that line really resonated, that 18-year-olds could go and die in the rice paddies of Vietnam, but not have the vote. And the power of that song inevitably got the discussion going. And then Richard Nixon passed that amendment so 18-year-olds could vote.
That's amazing.
Um,
I did not know that line, that concept, that line, "old enough to fight, not enough old enough to vote," came from the P.F. Sloan song.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to stress in our chat today, is that in songwriting, sometimes people may not know the origin of a phrase, but the phrase has incredible power. You and I were talking a little while ago. I'll come back to the history of songs, but you and I were talking, and it really brought up this really interesting point that the phrase "I can't breathe," in terms of the movement toward changing policing in the US, which is now a worldwide event, is a phrase that could be used in a song. And today I went online and I looked at the mural of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I had never gotten a real close-up view of it, so I kind of enlarged the image on my computer. And underneath the portrait of George Floyd, it says, "I can breathe finally." The suggestion that he's in heaven and he can breathe. But we have heard many people use that phrase, and it has a certain power. Another example in music is power. The book is Public Enemy's song 911 is a joke. And of course, that came about when a friend of the band was stabbed and was dying on the streets in Brooklyn, and they called 911, and the EMTs took way too long to get there, and their friend was dead. Okay, so naturally, the band was impacted by it, and they wrote 911 is a joke. There's a different level of response for the white community in 911 emergencies than there is for people of color. And that was true when Public Enemy wrote the song, and it's still true today. John Oliver, who I think is the funniest and most brilliant guy on TV, on HBO, like 5 years ago, had one of his op-eds, and he was talking about the 911 system in the US, and it still doesn't function well. Sometimes it can't locate people, and there are different response rates still for people of color in neighborhoods that aren't as good as neighborhoods where white people live. So this is still an issue. And 911 is a joke still has power as a song.
Speak a little bit about Public Enemy and their history and how they responded in their time in coming out of New York area, and just to, what do they have, how do we learn from what they did then and what they're still doing now? Public Enemy just released a new song last week. What can we learn from Public Enemy's journey?
Well, that's a tough question because they're still on the journey, and all musicians evolve over time. But one thing I think we can say about Chuck D and the gang is they don't apologize for their opinions. 911 is a joke, or when they attacked Evan Meacham in Arizona, who didn't want Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday to be a national holiday, they went after him. And they got some flack, but they did a music video that showed Evan Meacham, and then supposedly he was being blown up. And, they were attacked for that, even though it was tongue in cheek and it was a response to Evan Meacham's racism. So I think maybe the best lesson we can draw from it, David, is that you don't accomplish great things by going, gee, I've got to get a focus group, or I'm afraid how people might judge me if I have a strong opinion in this. The people who break through and shatter paradigms and become successful while having an impact are always people who go, I don't care if people criticize me, this has to be said. And I'm an artist and I have a right to say it in this way. And I'm sure that, Public Enemy took plenty of flack in their time from, people who were not willing and were made uncomfortable by their message.
Right. I think that there's been a sense, and I've read some famous bloggers talking about that now, is that artists don't want to speak up, don't want to offend potentially half their audience. So they're playing it more careful. They're trying to not strike an opinion, not hurt anybody, not offend anybody that might be their audience. So it's making
Right.
artists more likely to, not want to risk an endorsement of some sort, but maybe that's causing them to be less likely to speak out, less likely to step on some toes, less likely to piss somebody off, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I make the argument whenever I talk about music is power, that in history, the most popular artists who wrote socially conscious music oftentimes were told by their labels, do not do this. And the best example is not even a song that you and I would look at today and say, Ooh, that's controversial. It's Martin Gaye. What's going on? Berry Gordy said it was the worst song he ever heard, and he didn't want to hear it. And this, of course, would never happen today at a major label. An executive went to Marvin Gaye and said, you know what? Don't worry about Berry. Let's release 100,000 copies of this and see how it does. And it blew up instantly. And then Berry Gordy, even though he still didn't have any political consciousness, went, wow, well, I guess Marvin Gaye's onto something. I'm going to let him do what he wants to do. And sadly, Berry Gordy said, you can do your song, you're sweet, and talk about politics and the environment, but you only have 30 days to do it. And Marvin Gaye basically wrote, recorded, mixed, and then they packaged and shipped what's going on in 10 12-hour sessions.
Wow,
And of course,
that whole record was
historic.
made in 10 sessions.
Can you believe that? Because Berry Gordy
Amazing.
had said, I don't want you to spend any more time. And what else did that do? It set the stage for Stevie Wonder to have more freedom in his contract. And of course, it was Stevie Wonder who inevitably led the charge, the tour that got the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. But if it was up to Berry Gordy, never would have been done.
Wait, so
Never would have been recorded.
speak about Stevie and the Martin Luther King holiday. What was the connection there? I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Stevie had written a song about, happy birthday to you, basically a dedication to, King's work and getting a national holiday. And he did this tour, and I have a chapter on Gil Scott-Heron, whose writing I just thought was magnificent. He didn't want to be known as the godfather of rap or hip hop, but he was the great leader in terms of the power of poetic written language with music. And he was on that tour with Stevie. And it toured the United States, and it built consciousness, and it created people talking. And just as we see with policing changes happening recently, it's the event, but it's also the people talking about the event. And then it becomes power that is put on politicians, and the politicians say to each other, we can't basically sustain our position unless we do something. And the people have basically forced the politicians to enact legislation. And that's what's
So is
happened with policing. And it's what happens with all great socially conscious songs that help move the needle,
right, right. So I mean, so the song, are you saying essentially the song inspires people to march and to protest and to speak up to their ideally representative, elected representatives? But is it the street force, if you will, that moves the needle, that gets a Nixon or somebody to, I don't know.
I think it's a combination of things. Look, I give you a perfect example. I was on an interview show recently, and I said, if you were a songwriter or you were in a band right now, and you felt very strongly, no matter what your color, if you felt very strongly about what has happened, especially to white officers and Black citizens in the United States, this is the best time to write about it, to write a song that condemns it, and possibly wind up having a phrase of yours being repeated, like I can't breathe, like any song, like what's going on, just saying that phrase in 1970 after the album by Marvin came out was not only acknowledging the music, it was saying we understand what you are saying as an artist, and we feel it too as a people. So whether it leads a movement or it helps build a movement, it's incredibly powerful. Just a few words can stick in the head of people and help them. We Shall Overcome, which is the great, Pete Seeger influenced song that was taken by Black civil rights workers. Well, of all people, Lyndon Johnson, the president of the United States, who forced America farther into the Vietnam War, during a speech on national television, used the phrase, and we shall overcome. He was saying it in terms of racial violence and the Voting Rights Act that he passed in 1965. But there's an example of a guy who wasn't really a liberal, who said this song and this movement have such power that I'm going to take the language and use it to support myself.
Well, yeah, you're right. I think that's what the artists do, the music, songwriters, lyricists, singers have a phrase that encapsulates the feeling, the zeitgeist, and what's happening on the street, if you will, or in our case on the Twitter, if you will, and
Yeah.
give it language so that we realize this is a thing that's happening, and that almost by naming the dynamic, naming the thing that's happening, we realize it is happening, and then we can go, maybe we should shift this. What's the way to shift the dynamic? What's the thing to make the change?
Yes, yes. And I'd like to say something else about time, the passage of time, David.
Yeah.
Um, I want to encourage, people in the music industry who are socially conscious, that you don't give up because you write a song, it has an impact, and the world doesn't instantly change. I mean, we're talking about the early 60s and the civil rights movement, and here it is 2020, and we're now getting the police to get rid of chokeholds in New York City, and we're getting other things. Change takes a long time, but you don't give up. You're part of the passage of time. So now I want to tell you the story about one of my favorite musician composers who is incredibly socially conscious, and that's Peter Gabriel. So Peter Gabriel, in the late 70s, wrote a song, as you know, David, called Biko. And that was about the murder of a South African Black man who was fighting apartheid, Stephen Biko. Well, when Gabriel wrote the song, and he used actually African language and these incredibly powerful African singers and drum beating incorporated into a pop song, all of a sudden Americans who didn't even know anything about Biko being beaten to death in South Africa were singing this song. He was using it in his concert. It was very popular on radio play. And what it did was, and nobody expected this, the United States had invested billions of dollars in the country of South Africa, because that's where all the diamond mining was in the world. And Biko started spontaneously getting college students across America to not only be moved by the song Biko, but turn to the administrations of those colleges and say, we did some research. This college invested $500,000 in the government of South Africa, which is racist and supports apartheid. And we want you to divest your investment in that country. And if you don't, we're going to protest, and we're going to make your lives miserable. And of course, the administrations of colleges and universities didn't want to look like they were racist, even if they didn't really want to do anything. And within 3 years, by 1980, the United States had pulled out $1 billion with a B out of South Africa. And
Wow.
that movement was because of the college students who were moved and learned about Stephen Biko from Peter Gabriel. It's unbelievable.
That's amazing. That's
Just
amazing.
unheralded. So the next time somebody says, well, one song, it's not going to make a difference, do your homework. Sometimes one song is what made the difference when nothing else actually did.
That's beautiful. Well, I think artists need to speak what's on our minds and on their minds, whatever comes across our paths that needs to be spoken, whatever injustice or atrocity or screwed up dynamic. You just have to speak it in some way when it's ready to come out, and it finds its audience and it grows its momentum, and maybe the artist is ahead of the curve in noticing it, but by performing it and recording it, it rides a wave of awareness, perhaps.
Yeah, wherever it comes in the continuum, whether it's before people are aware, or if it's the thing that pushes the wave, so it crests so that people are more knowledgeable, or it just is that final piece that pushes people to say, no more, we're not taking it anymore. That's a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
I guess, from a practical standpoint, I think this is It's always hard to make a living as an artist, but this is a really great time to be a musical artist and to be politically active. It's not always the case. Sometimes people go, oh, don't rock the boat. We don't want you to talk about some situation, some topic that's very hot button. But this is the time to talk about anything you want to that's hot button because of what's going on in the world. Now, yeah, there's a pandemic, and you might say, Brad, my band can't even perform in public. What are you talking about? Well, everything that's going on, like our conversation here online, everything is going online for a while until we can all interact with each other without worrying about becoming ill. So that means that you can write songs for theater productions that are going online and need music, as bumpers or opening or closing. It means that there are people who are doing performance poetry, and maybe your song becomes something that's utilized in that kind of performance. It's an opportunity, but you also have to rethink how your music might be used, rather than the paradigm of just, hey, I'm promoting it over the internet. That's changing. How
Mhm.
else can you take your music and make it saleable in areas that weren't performance based on the internet, 3 months ago?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. It feels like during the lockdown, the pandemic lockdown, there was a pause where, first of all, we didn't know what was going to be happening next and how long we'd be locked down. But in terms of, and people started listening to music and people started performing music online and hearing our favorite artists sing our favorite songs from their living room or their kitchen.
Right.
But I think something shifted in that um, dance party songs were not important, and there had to be something of substance. There had to be something meaningful because we were in a more introspective. The world was a little bit more scared. The world was a little bit more united in a strange way. We were locked down everywhere, not knowing what the hell's going on. And
That's
so,
true.
yeah,
People have
yeah.
lost passion.
Say again.
Yeah, in a time of crisis, your next door neighbor goes, "How are you doing?" When there's no crisis, they don't give a damn. They ignore you. You wave to them and they just drive right by in your neighborhood. People are conscious about physical spacing. Um, this is a positive thing if you can tap into it, that there is a new sensitivity. We are suddenly even more aware of mortality. And
Yeah,
it's not that there can't be, happy songs, pop songs that are about love or just feeling free or dancing. It's not about replacing them. It's that normally there isn't much place for socially conscious music. And now is going to be a high point for doing that kind of music. So if you make money with your music and you help better society, what more can you ask? You get both dividends at the same time.
yeah. No, it's amazing. I think also, as we are in this vulnerable time where we locked down from the pandemic, and then with the uh, violence that's continued but brought to the forefront against Black people, there's been just a different awareness and a different sensitivity. And I've
Yeah,
noticed among Black friends of mine more willingness to just, not musicians, just speak out about how racism has impacted them throughout their life and experiences they've had that they've never shared publicly on their Facebook wall before. And so there's something that's coming out from this moment because we're here, we've got time, we're scrolling our Facebook worlds or
yeah,
Twitter. It's creating a different kind of audience and a little bit of a safer space, or a lot safer space to
yeah,
share
absolutely.
deeply. Let's,
I
so
got to
go
tell
ahead.
you, never seen, just a quick thought here. I have never walked down Ventura Boulevard in the San Fernando Valley and walked by a business where they had a piece of paper in the window that basically said, we want our customers to know that we also believe that Black Lives Matter and racism is not acceptable in any form in this country. I've just never seen that. So if businesses are saying we will be more sensitive to this topic, they're going to be more sensitive to other issues that go on, not just racism and how do we better policing, but anything at all. This is a great time to talk about the environment. Let's not go back to the old paradigm of polluting the planet, now that we're sort of coming out of our little bubbles here.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to talk about the James Brown song "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud." It's been on my mind a lot. I've been noticing people talking about it online. Tell me a little bit about we were talking earlier about it. You had just some thoughts about that and how it came about and the impact, and just tell me
Yeah,
your take on that song, please.
yeah. Well, I don't know if James Brown early in his career thought that he was going to write an anthem that basically was an ideal summation of what his race had been through historically. You know, um, "In a Cold Sweat" to me is the most danceable song that I can imagine. It's unbelievable. Um, but for his people, "Say It Loud" became an anthem. And it's not that there weren't other songs written, especially in the church, in gospel music, and the civil rights era, about overcoming and and believing that there would be justice. But this was a song that did something bolder than any other song. And it said, I'm not just saying that I'm angry. I'm not just saying that I'm fed up. I'm not just saying that the situation is wrong. I'm saying I'm proud of who I am. I don't want to look like you. I don't want to sound like you. I don't want to fit in. I want to be exactly who I am, and I want to be treated the same way as you. And that kind of sentiment hadn't been done yet, even though there had been socially conscious songs about the Black American experience. Kind of goes back to my earlier thought about this is a great time to be bold and come up with a phrase that maybe you never thought people would accept before because it was too in your face. And I think that's the historical importance of "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud." And in Music is Power, one of my favorite moments is quoting James Brown when he said he went to Africa and he saw little kids, little African village kids carrying his records, even though they didn't have record players, because they knew how important his music was and they'd heard it somewhere, and just carrying the record made them feel good. That's just phenomenal. And
Wow.
so we may not even know the effect that our music has on other countries or other peoples that we never meet when we finally get it out there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, so we're going to do a free giveaway today, a free download. But anything else you want to, any other points or songs you want to talk about, or anything else you want to hit before we do your free gift?
Yeah, yeah, that's I guess I would say that Music is Power is trying to give you a sense of a continuum. And again, like Gil Scott-Heron said, when you talk about change, you can't expect everything to change in a condensed period of time. You are part of a process. And so are the people who have died who are trying to change it. And so are the people who are ahead of you who you don't know, who are also a part of that same process. So when you write a socially conscious song, you are part of a great tradition. And however far you move the needle in your lifetime, the fact is that you are moving it. And that is a beautiful thing. And the other thing I would say is, I would remind people that if you don't normally write socially conscious music, you write great pop songs and that's what you're really good at. Writing one socially conscious song is enough. You don't have to dedicate your entire lifetime or career. You and I were talking earlier about Bob Dylan and the
Yeah.
pressure that was put upon him because no one had written poetry like Bob Dylan condemning the things that were wrong. And all of a sudden, he was elevated to this position he didn't want. And then people were saying, so do you think you're some kind of messiah? And he was like, no. Turns out that in a couple of years, he's not going to write songs like that anymore. But, just writing one song that becomes part of the discussion of how we better the world is a great accomplishment in my mind. Doesn't mean that you have to do 20 of them or do them for the rest of your life. So
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
want to
think
I
no,
want
no,
people to keep that in mind.
no. That's great. I guess I was gonna. I agree with you. I think it's somehow the personal the personal words as somebody's reaction to what we're seeing becomes, the personal is universal in writing. So speaking about one's reaction to whatever we're experiencing, we don't need to write the newspaper headline story. We're all seeing that, but what is the phrase? The phrase that may catch on is likely to be the phrase that comes intimately, innocently out of us as a writer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, it's not even the name of the song. It's just a phrase, in a chorus, and people love to chant it. I mean, back to Peter Gabriel. I describe this, and I get emotional because I was there at Peter Gabriel concerts where he would close the show with Biko. At the end of Biko, there's a phrase that people sing along. You know, it's basically sounds. It's notes. It's not words. But he gets the whole arena singing at the end with a drum beat, and then each person leaves the stage until just the drummer is drumming and the audience is still singing by themselves. And the drummer leaves and it's just the audience. So you can actually, in 1980, you could leave a Peter Gabriel concert just not even singing Biko, just going, ah, ah, ah. You could just sing that phrase, and it would remind you about the song, and it would remind you about racism and what we're supposed to do with the earth, and that's fantastic. And of course, music stays in your head longer than words.
That's beautiful. The music comes off the stage, lands in the humans, and then everyone's back in their car or the subways and the streets impacted by that. That's beautiful. I'm so glad you.
Yeah, and it lasts more than just the night of that you went to the concert, and the next day you've forgotten about it and go, no, it's still with you. It reaches you in a different way from reading a book about politics, or reading a pamphlet. Those are important things, but music has a staying power, and that's why I came up with the title, because I believe that it works on the brain in a very special way. And another reason to write socially conscious music is when you move people, you move them for life. They don't forget, they may not remember the songwriter, but they remember the song. And that's better than being forgotten the next day when people get up and go to work.
Right, right. No, it's beautiful. Thank you, Brad. So tell
Yeah.
us about what our free download gift will be for folks today.
Well, I'm going to give people, the first chapter of the book. I'll send them a PDF of, and also basically the chapter outline. And it covers everybody, by the way. It's got country. I got Frank Zappa in there, hip hop, and I've got comedy music from the Smothers Brothers and Tom Lehrer, and every kind of music that I could think of has socially conscious music. So you'll get the chapter outline, and you'll get the first chapter for free, and get a sense of what it's all about. Because we start with Union songs in the 19 teens, Joe Hill, and then we go to Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, and there's a rich tradition in this country of singing
What
about what we don't like.
what was one of the first of these songs that you speak of?
Well, well, they were not as in your face as 911 is a joke, but I would say, songs that celebrated life, not only gospel songs and songs from runaway slaves in the Civil War, but songs like This Land Is Your Land, Woody Guthrie. Funny thing is, This Land Is Your Land, when they published the song and then kids started learning it in schools, they left out the last stanza of the song. And the last stanza Woody wrote, there's a sign that says private property. And on the back of the sign was written nothing. And that part of the sign was made for you and me. So he's talking about private property and social control and saying, that's not made for us. What's made for us is democracy. And they were so afraid that they left that out of the songbooks. But now they put all the lyrics in.
Wow.
And they use language that you couldn't use in the 1920s or 30s as well. So you can be as forceful as you want with colorful language and still get your message across to people.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, so Brad Schreiber, so happy to have you here. Music is Power is the book, folks. The free download
Loved it.
is chapter one. You've inspired me. Maybe in the, we're in the Facebook group for the summit. Maybe we'll post some of the songs that we discussed today. We'll post some
Oh, I would
uh,
love that.
YouTube links, and maybe we can have people saying what their favorite songs are, and post some others, and maybe we can have Brad in for Q&A. And just so, folks, I want to know what your comments or what you learned today from this talk, and what inspired you, and if you have some protest songs or social change or political movement songs of your own, be happy to post them in the Facebook group, and we'll take a look and give a listen and maybe find an anthem. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. I'm constantly learning from other people I interact with about songs that are happening today. Jill Sobely has just written a wonderful song about people who don't want to wear masks and blame it on the liberals, taking it to the libs. Hilarious song, but really important message. Science is not about progressive versus conservative. Science knows more than you know, and you better listen to it or you might be dead. And she wrote a really wonderful song, and it couldn't have been better timing.
Oh, that's great. It's called Taking It to the Libs, you saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Science knows more than you, so deal with it and listen to
Great. I love
it.
Jill. She's great. She's great. All right, Brad Schreiber, thank you so much for being on the summit. Folks, please comment
Thank
and let
you.
us know what you think on the Facebook group. And Brad, so glad you could be here to enlighten us and inspire us. And
Really appreciate it. Wonderful, David. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
absolutely, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, I'm going to find the stop button, and we'll talk to you guys all soon. See you online. Bye.